The Arctic Climate Impact Assessment was put together and authorized by the 8 Arctic nations in concert with the 6 indigenous peoples organizations like the Inuits and the Samis and Aleuts, Wichans and the like, and the International Arctic Science Committee, which is composed of representatives of 18 academies of science from 18 countries. So it's founded on a base that has expectations of being credible in science at the same time as being relevant to the needs of the 8 Arctic countries and the indigenous people of the North. For those of you who haven't followed the climate issue, particularly in the Arctic, but generally speaking,
eat first, then ask questions.
Thank you.
We're about ready to begin. When we're welcoming you to our living room in the Arctic, that spans from the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Nunavik, that are here part of this very important conference that's taking place.
When the Kudlik was being lit, I was standing there watching. And I remember, I was born in an igloo, by the way, so I know exactly what it is like when it's full darkness all the time for months, and that's the source of life you had. Even our Arctic ambassador, Jack Anawal, would remember, because we both come from right on the Arctic Circle. We used to fight over that flame adjuster, the stick there, because it was put into the seal oil, burnt, and so on. And then for us, it was like a lollipop. So we. Good morning. On behalf of Inuit of Canada, I would like to welcome you to Arctic Day. I am the president of Inuit Kanatami, or ITK, the national organization that advocates on behalf of Inuit. Inuit Kanatami frames climate change more than just an environmental issue, but rather as a human issue. It impacts us as individuals and as communities. Through our Unikakatigi project, which means sharing stories, which will be presented here later today, Inuit Kanatami has documented the complex interrelationships between observations, impacts, and adaptation to climate change in Inuit communities. One of the reasons I'm very glad to be here is to add to the chorus of voices that have recognized the Arctic as an impacted area. Due to our small population, it is important to let the nations of the world and Canada know that climate change is not just an environmental issue, it is a human issue. It is not something that threatens the North in the future, it is already a reality. We need action, and in our own way, we are taking action. Working together, we can make a substantial and positive improvement for Inuit. Inuit Kanatami recommends some things to be done to develop and enhance partnership with the Government of Canada.
The Arctic is the barometer of the world. Melting of highly reflective Arctic snow and ice reveals darker land and ocean surfaces, increasing absorption of the sun's heat and further warming the planet. And what is terrible in this is the sense of vicious circle. The more the Arctic will be affected, the more you will have consequences for global warming, and then the more the whole planet and the Arctic will be affected, and so on, and so on, and so on. I mean, if you, si on perd le pergélisol, eh bien, vous avez des espèces végétales et animales qui se décomposent, qui tombent en putréfaction et qui envoient encore plus de méthane dans le ciel et qui donc contribuent encore plus au changement climatique. Because of global warming, indigenous communities are facing major economic and cultural impacts. Many indigenous peoples depend on hunting polar bear, walrus, seals, and caribou, herding reindeer, fishing and gathering, not only for food and to support the local economy, but also as the basis for cultural and social identity. De nombreuses communautés et installations côtières sont exposées à une augmentation des tempêtes. Dans certains cas, les communautés humaines et les installations... So it is so critical that today, in the Arctic Day, we listen the stories of the Arctic indigenous peoples. They need to be heard.
The Arctic is now experiencing some of the most rapid climate change on Earth. I want to thank those speakers that spoke before me that brought a lot of these issues out in their speeches. The impacts that we are experiencing, the impact on our way of life. Our lakes are drying up where we used to traditionally hunt, our small lakes. Fish are dying. We have in the Yukon and other places as well, there's places where the salmon haven't come back this year or in very low numbers. Traditional medicines fast disappearing. Species coming in that aren't indigenous to the area. Different birds, different wildlife. When we get sick, we sometimes get a fever, chills and sweats. Our Mother Earth is sick. And our changing climate shows all the symptoms of an illness. In this case, one brought on by ourselves, but one we can remedy if we start to work together as one.
This mask represents Mother Earth crying. And as we all know, Mother Earth needs our help. It was said by a Ganawagi leader the other day, this global warming is Mother Earth has a temperature. We all know that when we get sick, we run a fever. This is Mother Earth's fever. I'd also like to thank the Canadian government for all of the help that they've given to the Indigenous people in the North, and especially for their support in not opening ANWR in Alaska. Thank you very much.
The Arctic is now considered the health barometer for the planet. And I often say we Inuit are the mercury in that barometer. And for example, in 2003, in fact, the United Nations Governing Council passed a resolution based on that principle. And the Arctic, in fact, though, is not mentioned in this particular convention. And I think in light of the work that has been done now, which is so compelling and so strong in terms of the science and the traditional knowledge that we have always known, and the testimonies of our hunters and our elders, the fact that the Arctic is not in the convention is a very glaring omission and an error in our belief.
The fact is clear. We have climate change now. Who don't want to believe it, please go to the Arctic. I did it more than once. You cannot come back and ask for business as usual. It is true as well that the Arctic, say it in a brutal way, is something like the dumping place of the world. In the Arctic, we have the highest concentration of the persistent organic pollutants. They were never produced there, where they were never used there. Kofi Annan once mentioned that those chemicals, those PCBs and DDTs and dioxins and furans, are the traveler without passport. They're going around the world. And you have now asked, Where do we have the highest concentration? We have the highest concentration of this persistent organic pollutant in the mother milk of the Indian women. This is the consequences of dumping.
Thank you. What I said in my language was, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the elders, the chiefs, all the delegates, all the participants, and especially the Dene people also that have come here to participate and to learn about the impacts of climate change in Dene Day. I'd also like to thank the Inuit for their forefront on this issue. And I believe that if it wasn't for the Inuit putting out this message out there, that even the Dene would have had a hard time to try to bring this issue out to the forefront. So I would really like to commend Sheila and the Inuit people for bringing this issue out. Marcy Cho.
Probably the most important message that you heard over and over in these opening speeches this morning is that the Arctic is the one place on the planet that is experiencing climate change dramatically right now and has done so for over a generation. But much larger changes are projected in the future. If we look at this picture of the Northern Hemisphere, which is a depiction of the strong signal in the Arctic, this is 2,000 years, and you can see over here on the right that we're beyond any experience over the last 2,000 years, and I hope to convince you that that's true for at least 1,000,000 years. But places like Alaska have seen dramatic increase in temperature, and if you look here, you'll see it's about 6, 7, 8 degrees Fahrenheit. The whole planet has only warmed 1 degree Fahrenheit, or 0.6 of a degree centigrade over the last 100 years. And places like Alaska and Western Canada are seeing increases almost 10 times the rate of the rest of the planet.
I'd like to raise my hands to the people whose land this is and say Gunchish for allowing us to come here. Raise my hands to the United Nations, to all of you, the people of Montreal, that thank you for inviting us to your wonderful city. That song I sang for you is my Yanyedi entrance song, where we thanked all of you for being here today, because you're making a good difference being here, supporting Mother Earth. And that's what when I went down, that's what we went to do, is to thank Mother Earth for all the gifts that she has given us, and to remember and to respect that we must treat her with respect as we treat all of the Kiankawa's creation.
As many of you know, we had some key U.S. decision makers and politicians visiting the Yukon this summer, including Senators Hillary Clinton and John McCain. They wanted to get a first-hand look at how climate change was affecting people in the North and the North's environment. I think the stark reality for them was very real. All of them stated that although they had read binders full of scientific data, technical studies and research, that it was only when they were actually able to speak to the First Nations people of our territory to learn about their lives and how they were being affected that they truly realized the impact climate change was having on the North. The Yukon government, ladies and gentlemen, is committed to continuing its work with local, national, and international governments to moderate the impacts of global climate change on Yukon's environment and our people and our way of life. Ladies and gentlemen, the video you are about to see is the culmination of a great deal of work by a tremendous team that I'd like to, at this point, congratulate.
Looking at the issue of climate change, but not necessarily just looking at it, but sharing the observations of our peoples, particularly the peoples from the Athabaskan point of view. For those who may not be aware, we are of course not in the high Arctic, but we are in the subarctic zones of North America, in Northwest Territories, the Yukon, and Alaska. The Arctic Athabaskan Council represents currently some 66,000 Athabaskans in those regions. And of course, we're particularly concerned with the developments as of late. Our hunters, our fishers, our trappers, and their observations and their readings of the lands not only suggest but identify that there are indeed very significant changes in our environment.
It's way back in time when people used to work with their hands, our grandfather and forefathers before them, when they made the world no pollution or anything back then. Anyhow, the song is about them times.
This afternoon I have the privilege and honor to introduce, through Arctic Eyes, an Athabaskan view of climate change.